Hi, this is Rachel Meliotis from Punch Tape, and we are here with another episode of the AI Marketing Stack. Thanks so much for joining us. So first, I want to tell you about an event that we're having in June called the AI-driven Marketing Shift, and I'd love for you to attend and or be a part of the action as a speaker. You can reach out to me. The best and easiest way for you is www.punchtape.com. The dash is not the word, it's an actual little dash. So with that, I'm going to actually get to what I think are some of the top stories from the past couple of weeks in the AI and marketing area. So the first one is that, as you know, I'm sure, ChatGPT ads are actually happening, and they are going to be extending beyond their trial period. There is a lot of interest in them, not surprisingly so. It looks like people that are investing in them are Omnicom Media, WPP, and Dentsu, and they're expanding internationally. So this is definitely sort of the next step in paid ads, search engine optimization, shifting to AI engine optimization, and how people are finding information. So that's one thing to keep a look at. And all of these stories will be linked in the description. The second thing is, and this is something that was starting to happen already last year, I believe, with some Christmas ads, is that some brands are starting to make fun of, take a stance against AI slop. And some of those brands include Equinox and Almond Breweries. And so that's something to take a look at too. Does taking a stance one way or the other, is that something that you can utilize in your brand? Do you have a stance one way or the other? I think this is something that will change over time, but there's definitely public pushback, next story, which is Samsung AI ads are running without proper disclosure. And that's something, again, we've talked about that before here, where you need to be authentic and trustworthy and straightforward. If you are using AI, don't beat around the bush about it. You've got to tell people what's actually happening. Don't try to be cute. And I think that they're facing some backlash here because they haven't been. So those are three things. Again, all of that will be in the description. So today we have a really great interview. This is an interview with a woman that put together a survey, and actually she's done several surveys. She's at SEMrush, and we did a special report last week, which I will also link. And I got to talk to her a little bit more in depth about the results. So I really found this interesting, and it's specifically around content marketing jobs and what she's seeing with those. She did another one on SEO marketing jobs. And so really interesting. So her name is Margarita Loktionova. She's a product marketing lead, as I said, at SEMrush. Thank you so much to her. It was a great conversation. And I'm probably, if she'll allow it, her on again at some time in the future. It was great to have data backing up the information and having a good discussion about it. Enjoy, and I hope to hear from you about the event that we're having in June. Thanks so much. Hello there, and thank you for joining me today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
So you led with, I believe, a couple other people, which I'm happy to give a shout out to, a really great survey and then write up of content marketing job listings and sort of seeing, I believe the headline was it's moving from writing to ownership, which I totally agree with. But I just thought it was very insightful, very data backed. And that's what we're going to talk about today.
Great. Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah, exactly. The study, also our amazing data team helped us execute it. And we also have just published the second half on SEO.
Oh, okay. I'll definitely
That's
go look at
right.
that.
It's similar. Yeah, it's all about becoming more strategic.
Okay, good. No, I'll definitely take a look at that. All right. So and to the listeners of this podcast episode, I did mention it in the special report we did a couple weeks ago, and I promised that we would have the person on that was in charge of it. So here we are. So starting off, you're saying that sort of this career is splitting into two extremes, with execution roles up 1,000%, and senior leadership up 300+%, but the mid-level is down. What does that tell you about how companies are restructuring their content teams?
Right. I mean, obviously, one important note, right, that is just, it's an isolated study. So, I would always take those things with a grain of salt.
Sure.
So it doesn't mean that if you're a content marketing manager, you're suddenly irrelevant, but it does tell you a little bit, about where you might be kind of refocusing, right, to stay competitive. So I would say, yeah, there is a certain structural change. And the good thing is not about a budget cut, right? Because a few years ago when AI started, everyone was talking about how the AI content marketing career, right, profession is going to be obsolete, how no
Yep.
one is going to need content marketers. Time proves that is not true. But exactly the role and the impact of content is being reevaluated. So I would say those two main parts, right? The strategic one, it kind of tells us that content marketing, and it's the same as we saw in the SEO study, it's becoming more of a business function, right? So it's not
Hmm.
about just simply creating copy for this email or for this social media post or for this ad, because well, AI can do it. If let's say you can go the path of the content engineer, for example, right? You can set
Hmm.
up systems, you can set up production, but it is a lot about the operational, and keeping quality. So it's a different structure, right? It's about being able to write a nice email. It's about to be able to scale it, right? Or you might also be focusing on the strategy, right? How different channels, how different content formats, how does it all contribute to business goals? And yeah, and I think for me, the biggest shift is that, right? You cannot just be a writer anymore.
No.
Yeah, you need to, I mean, honestly, the role combines both, right? You need to oversee the strategy. You need to know why you're doing this and what do you want to do next and how it connects to where the company wants to move. But you also need to be able to develop systems and processes, right? To create content both at scale, but also keep the human element, keep the narrative, keep the quality, and kind of integrate brand and product and all this into this equation.
Yeah, I think it's really tough in this job market right now for a few reasons, but I do think one that I didn't think of at first and then started to was that people were like groups of marketers were pausing on, okay, we have an open spot that we need to backfill or we have money for someone new. How do we want to fill that? And I think that has added to the tough job market. So I was pleased and saddened to see that that is something that you found as well. I also noticed too when looking at job listings that kind of regardless of the level of the job, this is on LinkedIn, by the way, a lot of the people applying, and it's a lot, were senior people. So it's definitely an interesting time to be a content marketer. So yeah, so that was very interesting. Okay. So next I wanted to ask about Content SEO Manager, which like you said, everything's more about sort of managing and guiding and owning is now tied in with like the content creator. And you're seeing that as the single most common title in the market. What does that role actually look like day to day and why did it emerge so fast?
Right. Honestly, I think it's kind of part of the same shift, right? That you are not just owning what you create, but you're also owning the distribution.
Mm.
And, just a little thought here, kind of to frame my point, even like back to what you said, right? That yes, the market is challenging, but I think honestly, there are also opportunities, right, for content not being seen anymore as a copywriting profession or,
True.
yeah, like as someone, and I saw people commenting this, but we're typically doing what other people, other teams wants us to do. If I'm either working for a PMM or I'm working for the performance team, but you shouldn't, that's not how it should be. So like I personally, I have always kind of been owning, when I was in the content marketing profession, I was owning content strategy. And you cannot have a strategy, let's say, if you don't know how each content piece is going to get distributed.
Yep.
So I think it's just a natural, right? And obviously, when we say Content SEO Manager, it might mean that you're creating content that is being cited by AI, that's
Hmm.
ranked on
Yep.
Google, and probably, in this particular case, it's something that's more aligned with the SEO strategy. So let's say what was a normal thing maybe 10 years ago, right? We would have an SEO team and you would have a content marketing team.
Yep.
So the SEO team would feed the keywords and the content marketing team would create. And and this is really not effective, right? It creates a gap. I mean, I think SEO specialists, they often would have a very powerful view on, the bigger picture and strategic moves and like validating ideas.
Mm.
I feel like content marketeers have like all the necessary knowledge and tools to be able to be the person that decides what to do and why, right? Versus just simply creating it. So I think for me, it's also this shift to driving the strategy and owning results.
Yeah, and I do think there's still, like, when I've used AI to be my, like, writing partner, it's still, it doesn't replace me. Like, there's still judgment calls to be made and nuances. And, I read too an article recently that was like, what happens when your consumer is an AI agent? So, I mean, it's an interesting time, and it certainly is different. But I'm trying to, and I'm encouraging listeners to sort of lean into all that difference, because I think if you were good at what content marketing was 2, 3 years ago, you're going to be good at this. So this was interesting too. So storytelling, like the term, right, jumped from 8% to 29% of senior job listings in just 3 years. That's one of the most dramatic shifts in the data. Why do you think companies are suddenly naming it? I don't think it's new necessarily, but naming storytelling as a hard requirement rather than an assumed skill.
Yeah, for sure. I think there are a few things here. I mean, one that I would mention is for me, in my career, for example, like I started in marketing, then I moved to content, then I moved to product marketing. But now I feel like it's also becoming part of brand. And,
Mhm.
the value of content and its connection to brand is, like is important. And it's also makes the content marketing career valuable, right? And makes content marketing like and kind of an integral part of the business structure. And why this is happening, I think, for one, right, is kind of AI kind of exposed how generic content already was,
Mm.
right? Sort of maybe before, like storytelling assumed as kind of humans were writing, right? And
Mhm.
this is the story you're telling. But now AI can produce correct, well written content. But what people and businesses are looking for are points of view, framing, specific
Mhm.
narratives, and how it all connects to back to again to the brand, to the product, and the story we want to tell. And also, this differentiation became essential. It's not, I think it's the evolution of the trend that has already been happening.
Mm.
Brands that tell powerful stories, they really stick. And this is the only thing that at the end of the day, people remember. And with all the noise and
Mhm.
also how little control you have at this point of how your brand is represented. If
True.
you let's say, even if you take AI search in isolation, the control is limited, right? So having this powerful story is really what makes your brand stick. And content is the means, it's the way you communicate the story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think too, kind of, you glanced upon this too. Like, storytelling to me is about like this holistic consistency across what is a very fragmented like landscape. And to your point, there's less control, whether it be like an AI or user generated content. But if you are consistent, then I think you have a better chance of the echoes from those people or AI, being what you want it to be.
Yeah, totally. And it is true, using the example of this research, right? Because every research piece, right, that is published by the content and product marketing team, right? It has to tell a specific story
Mm.
that is consistent with the story that the brand is telling. And then this is consistent with what the product is offering, right? When we at SEMrush talk about, right, how the content marketing profession is becoming more strategic, and how it now covers also SEO and AI search and all those surfaces and brand visibility. It connects back to our main message, right? That everyone is a brand visibility strategist at this point. So every small piece reinforces this message. So you are telling a story, even if it's like an isolated data study about, that's based on analyzing Indeed.com job postings. So yeah, when
Mhm.
you think about that, it is all storytelling. So, and yeah, in the value of this at the end of the day, if the study got, it went viral and people talk about it, like what is the outcome do they have, right? What lands at the end of the day? So what is the takeaway? So it's exactly that.
Yeah. I was almost going to skip this next question, but then I was thinking about it and I have thoughts on it. So I want to see what your thoughts are. So, data collection and analysis grew as a responsibility by over 800% for non-senior content roles. This again is not new. So that's what I was kind of thinking. But like, what are they expecting people in those sort of junior and mid-level, areas to do with the data that they weren't already doing?
Right. I mean, obviously, I think it really depends on the company and the role. Then content, as we know, right, is traditionally harder to measure, especially when we talk
Yes.
about organic.
Yep.
But it is possible to measure. I think it's just your ability to connect it to bigger goals. So if
Exactly.
right, so if we're talking about, we have a big brand goal, right? We want to drive a specific perception or a specific awareness in this specific niche, right? Like we at SEMrush, we always, we want to be top of mind when it comes to modern search. So how do we do it? So in this case, right, it's not, when we're doing studies, we're not going to be after an MRR mark, right? Because it's not realistic and this is not what it's about.
Mm.
But if you can have specific, let's say we know that we got that many shares, that many people commented. Let's say we got this speaking opportunity, we got those media mentions. And at the end of the day, right, it all goes back to our brand goal of establishing our presence in this specific topic, in this specific niche, then it's working. I mean, but again, right? I have typically looked at this as a funnel. So when I started at SEMrush, I was actually, I mean, when things were easier, I had a pretty much like strategy for the year. This is
Mm-hmm.
traffic we're growing. This is how it's converting into
Yep.
payments and trials. It was like all planned and we were going according to the plan. So right now it is harder to estimate. And I think why it also became more challenging. So I think, yeah, connecting it to the right inputs and connecting it all back to the right business goals. And this is what's important versus just
Yeah.
ROI.
And this is where I think it's like the AI tooling, it's like really kind of looks super clear that that is able to do things that would have, if we like, cobbled it together, we could have done, but it's like it can pull all of that together in a way that we weren't able to before. And it gives such a better picture. The first episode of this podcast, I talked to a woman about how like previously sort of all of the tools weren't really set up for marketing at all. And so weren't getting to like the why and all of this stuff. And so I think we're seeing that change. And because we're getting those insights, we can respond in a different way, in a quicker way. So that I'm actually really excited about.
Yeah, for sure.
This is interesting too. So the idea of prompt engineering, this term came up pretty early when ChatGPT like exploded onto the world, right? But you're not seeing that in the listings. What's up with that? Like, what do you think? Why do you think that's missing? Because I do think that is part of it.
Yeah, I would say a few reasons. On the one hand, I think we moved past even prompting
Mm,
to, building an agent, to building a workflow. And I mean, I think everyone
true.
is, including myself, is anxious about it. I feel like I am always behind. Probably many feel this way. So, you're not alone if that's what you're thinking now. But yeah, I think a part of it is that, the prompting is a very isolated thing. And this would probably be more applicable as a specific skill to like an AI engineer, like AI
Hmm.
ops engineer who comes in and, establishes automation systems. But I think it's just that typically for marketeers, it's often more mentioned like, how do you use AI? Can you strategize? So it's more like,
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point.
exactly, yeah, like finding an area that can be automated and needs automating because like it's an operational gap, and then understanding how to do it with different tools in a way that, improves the process and let's say doesn't reduce the quality.
I agree. And I think the first point you made is also important that we're moving from prompting to workflows. So I think those are two good reasons. It is interesting though, because I do feel like it's came into the zeitgeist and is still sort of popping around, but so interesting where you see it and where you don't see it. So I have to touch upon the salary data. So it does say median senior compensation is up 54% to 161K. And then whoever's making this money, the maximum, I was like, how do I get that? It was
Tell me
840K. I
about
was
it.
like, what? So, tell me a little bit about, what you think is in those numbers, why you're seeing those numbers rise.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, let's also keep in mind, inflation and
Of
economic,
course.
obviously. So that is obviously part of it. But I mean, I hope to think that it demonstrates, the same shift that we're talking about
Yep.
here today, that content marketing profession is not becoming less relevant, it's becoming more relevant, and it's becoming a differentiator. So, and also because we're seeing that more senior people, right, are kind of needed. It's either like, or senior people who understand strategy, or people who are very AI native and, and
Mm.
can set up things that are going to
Yep.
save company a lot of money. So obviously you're going to pay for it, right? Because it's directly connected to a real business objective. So I think it's part of it. And yeah, it's both a challenge because
Mm.
we need to not only like learn and and relearn, but keep learning every day. But just like
Hmm.
anything else, really, yeah, it also means that we're content marketers are not becoming less relevant. The role is shifting. I mean, in terms of, yeah, like the outlier numbers, obviously, like I said, right, it's a study.
Yeah.
There is an outlier. We don't know what that is. It's probably someone, I mean, with this unique
Lucky.
skills. I mean, but we saw, right, the companies like OpenAI, they were hiring content marketers with
True.
what, like over 200.
Yes.
I mean, but it's great to see when AI companies, right, that were once seen as like someone who will defy content marketers are hiring ones. But again, right, people I think are missing the point. They're not hiring them to write email copy. They're hiring
Mm.
them to strategize at scales, to tell brand stories, to earn the company money and brand awareness.
And that's the main point I think that we keep coming back to, right? And I don't think they whoever they is were right before either. Like it was almost seen as sort of like creative humanities driven job, but it really is super important to the business and driving revenue. I just think it was harder. There is a creative component certainly, but I also think it was harder to point directly back to revenue. So I guess I'm glad that the whole marketing, industry is getting props. So
For sure.
yeah, so that's really interesting. I just find it such an interesting career path and how it's evolved. So we've talked about workflow automation. That was listed as a responsibility. It feels like it's a growing one, right? With 13 to 17%. I've also heard, the term go to market engineer come up now or something similar. And I think you mentioned a variation on that. Do you think people are, and the answer is probably both, but do you think people are looking for that's a specific person to fill? Or is like I go into a marketing group and as sort of like a senior content person am expected to create a pipeline?
Yeah. I mean, I think it depends. I have seen companies hiring specifically, I mean, the content engineers. So which might make sense, right? They say, well, we have a ongoing, go to market activations. We need you to build a system that just like makes it,
Mm.
like a factory. You need to control the output. You need to strategize, but it needs to be working. And we need it for you to make it effective, right? So I've seen roles that are just about that. But what I think is more common is, I mean, this is, I think, in a way, it's a bit extreme and it's like already like a different, layer, different type of a job. But most of the companies at this point, from any marketeer, product marketing, content, whatever, they would expect you to
Mm.
not only know how to use AI tools, but actively start looking for, for opportunities, like what areas need to be automated, like why and how, so that they can move faster. So I think, yeah, this becomes expected, but in reality, I mean, everyone is still learning.
Yeah.
Like I was talking to my friend the other day that was like, oh my God, I mean, I also work so much that don't always have enough time, to learn, but I need to
Mm.
learn. So like sometimes I'm like, okay, I'm going to pause. I'm going to build this thing now and then I'm going to keep working. But it doesn't always, work out like this. And she was like, well, we're living this bubble. So the reality is that most of the world is still not there yet. You're just
True.
in the center of it. But it's definitely something that everyone will have to master. So, if you haven't already, for sure, just like dedicate some time. You
Totally.
cannot become an expert overnight, but maybe, I don't know, like an hour per week that, yeah, you
Hmm.
would learn things, try something new. And then once you get there, like once you understand, it becomes easier.
I agree. I think you can do so much in 1 hour a week. Like you try something new and you're like, what? And it just like changes how you think of things. I do think too, just to add to what you were saying, that I think more and more people are expected to be able to hack together something, right? If it ends up being something that you build in-house, I think maybe that's when like engineers come in. There's also just sort of knowing what you want and how that's created. And then there's also purchasing services or product. So the knowledge I think is going to pay off whether it's some like little thing you make for yourself, whether you're making a buying decision, or you have to interact with a developer to make something more robust.
That's right.
So I'm going to skip down to you did a study like this in 2023. Where do you see what's the craziest stuff that you see there, or just stuff of note that you want to mention?
I mean, I would say, yeah, like there wasn't anything that, let's say, was, oh wow, like why is this happening? I would say the main takeaway is that right around this time, that AI was just like around the corner, because I
Hmm.
think there
Yeah.
was also, I'm mixing the dates now, but yeah, we basically did one study and it didn't get published, but we did one study right at the beginning of ChatGPT,
Yeah. Yeah.
and there was like a decrease in the number of job postings, and we were like, I just don't know, I just
Oh,
didn't have the time to publish it at the time, but I remembered it, and my
sure.
mental framing was like, oh my god, I mean, I hope it's nothing too negative, because we don't want to, publish
Yeah.
something that people gets people anxious. So that is the good part, that I didn't find anything, that suggests that the profession is, dying, which is like everyone likes
Yes, I
online to say
agree.
that things are dying, something is always dying. But no, it's not dying. For me, like, it confirmed what I've been seeing and talking about for a while. If you want a content marketing career, well, you have to expand and you have to deepen, you
Mhm.
have to get into product, you have to talk to users, you have to understand brand. So you have to really become a marketing strategist that is, with content kind of in the center of it. But again, I think it's an opportunity because this work is way more interesting and rewarding. And we're just, yeah, um, we can learn to automate things, and to really become engineers and strategists and everything in between. So yeah, I think it's an opportunity, but definitely that comes, with a lot of work, a lot of self-discipline, and managing an anxiety. But yeah, the main thing is that the trend is positive and there is a shift, but this shift is, yeah, I think it's going to lead to something, something good, and like both for people in the career and also for companies.
Yeah, I totally agree. I want to thank you for you and your team for putting together this survey. I found it fascinating, and I want to thank you for taking the time to talk to me about it. I've really enjoyed our discussion.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so very much. Also, yeah, for to you and for yeah to everyone who also checked out the study. Really glad that it's helpful. And yeah, as I said, we already have the SEO study
Hmm.
live. So
Check it out.
yeah, on our blog. And yeah, we're releasing lots of those. So yeah,
Awesome.
keep track
Yeah,
of.
absolutely. And we'll make sure to link to all of that stuff in the description in the show notes. So thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.